Na mô tassa bhagavata arahato samma sambuddhassa. Na mô tassa bhagavata arahato samma sambuddhassa. Na mô tassa bhagavata arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Blessings to everyone. Tonight we've gathered at Bodhipala Monastery, South Australia, to practice the Dhamma. And behind me, the new Buddha statue is sitting on the shrine. It's been here a few weeks now, so adds to the peaceful atmosphere in the meditation hall here. And we have one more ceremony to complete, which we'll do after the rains retreat. We'll be installing some relics of the Buddha in the head of the statue behind me. I was just contemplating that, contemplating the relics. What draws people to Buddha relics? These small pieces of bone reputed to be from the body of the Buddha after his cremation. They were collected and then distributed. I remember maybe 30 years ago, I went with Lumpur Anand to visit the Buddha's tooth relic, which had come over to Thailand from China, Beijing, one of the big Buddhist temples there where it was normally housed. They invited, the Thai Sangha invited the monks in China to bring it over and put it on display for about 1 month on the edge of Bangkok. And hundreds of thousands of people queued up every day to see it and to pay respects to the relic. And most of the visitors could hardly see it because it was in a large receptacle, cordoned off by a rope, and they could bow and meditate next to it, chant pujas, such as chant Iti Piso Bhagawa versus the praise of the Buddha and so on. But it's interesting to see so many people had so much faith in the relic, the tooth relic of the Buddha, one of the tooth relics. There's another one in Kandy in Sri Lanka. So in itself, it's just a tooth. Nothing, it doesn't look that special, but obviously it has a very great attraction and a magnetism. It draws out many good qualities in people, because when they go to see it, they bow, they meditate, they chant, they remember the teachings of the Buddha. And you could say, well, that's just faith. You may even say, well, it's just blind faith. What good is that? But if it brings out all these good qualities in people, well, that's one good thing. When people go to pay respects to relics of the Buddha, generally they have a very wholesome state of mind. Faith, sattva arises in the mind, and this has a brightening effect on your mind. At least on that day or at that time, it helps you to let go of more normal stressful thoughts, the more darker thoughts that you may be stuck with some of the time. So we call it a skillful means, an ubaya, when you pay respects to relics, recollect the qualities of the Buddha. It's a skillful means to bring up wholesome states of mind, which can be the forerunner of samadhi or our meditation, and strengthens our faith, our confidence in the Buddha, his teachings, the path of practice that he left us. So even though that, a Buddha relic may be something very small and ordinary to look at, it has a certain powerful effect. There's a certain good energy that stimulates very good states of mind in one who has faith. So that tooth relic, over a period of a month, hundreds of thousands of people went to see it every day, tens of thousands of people queuing up. Some people only just for a few minutes. As monks, we were, you might say, lucky, fortunate. We could go inside the area with the relic and have a close look and then sit there and meditate. And the Chinese monks who came with the relic, they had a team who were sitting meditation 24 hours a day to guard it, because it's something that is valued. So they guarded it in, I think it was 4 monks at a time, sitting meditation, like heavenly bodyguards, spiritual bodyguards. And that's what, the practical result of having a relic of the Buddha. It brings out the faith that your people will actually sit and meditate with it for hours and hours and hours. One of the qualities of mind that it brings up is called pasada, this radiance of mind. It's both peaceful, very wholesome. When one recollects the Buddha, it can come through chanting or listening to a teaching, reading a sutta, or in meditation, practicing Buddhanusati, recollecting the qualities of the Buddha. Pasada arises and brings up great faith and kind of pushes away some of the negativity of the mind, the unwholesome states of mind that so easily fill our mind. So sometimes we work at it. You consciously meditate, recollecting the Buddha, to bring up mindfulness directed to the Buddha as a way of training your mind to bring up skillful qualities. Some people are attracted by the compassion, the kindness of the Buddha. Some people are attracted by the sacrifices the Buddha made to build his barami. So they recollect that and it brings up lots of energy and faith. Some people are inspired by the wisdom of the Buddha and the wisdom teachings and so on. Some people are inspired by the great energy and effort of the Buddha that he put forth to reach enlightenment. But these are all skillful recollections and even meditations that we can develop to train the mind to bring up this sense of radiance and joy, happiness, which is so nourishing for our practice. Sometimes it comes from our own efforts, meditating. Sometimes it's stimulated by something external, like a relic or a statue of Buddha. Sometimes it can be spontaneous. Sometimes spontaneously one just remembers the Buddha or thinks of a teaching from the Buddha, and that brings up the recollection of all these very wholesome qualities, and the mind can become quite peaceful and happy in that moment, and it's just spontaneous. It wasn't really planning it. Sometimes the mind can become so absorbed into recollecting the Buddha that rapture and happiness arises, can bring tears to the eyes, have goosebumps and your hair stand on end. If the rapture is very powerful, very strong, then you can have great feeling of lightness in your body, even when you're walking, not just when you're sitting in meditation, but say walking around, but you recollect the Buddha. The body feels so light, you can hardly feel the weight of your body touching the ground. The rapture is like that. brings a buoyancy to the mind, and then that is often reflected in the body as well. It's literally like you're floating around. I know some monks who, when they walk meditation and they recollect the Buddha, reciting the word Buddha, 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 recollecting the Buddha, their mind and body becomes so light that they don't feel much pain or tiredness, so they can walk for many hours, absorbing into their meditation. And of course, eventually the body becomes very tired, but they can overcome feelings of tiredness, pain, not thinking about anything else, quite happy just to walk back and forth, recollecting the Buddha. There's one part of our practice is to recollect the Buddha, our teacher. It's one of those regular practices one should engage in if you're following the Buddhist path. You remind yourself of the teacher. Sometimes, depending on your character, some people like to read the life story of the Buddha, the actual events, remind themselves what the Buddha did. Some people think of and recollect the qualities. Some people like to visualize, so they visualize a Buddha statue that they've seen before, and they focus their mind on recreating that image in their mind as a way to concentrate the mind. Then they absorb into that image, just the mindfulness is directed to creating that image and holding the image in their mind. If you're recollecting the wisdom teachings of the Buddha, well, then that may support going on to develop insight. Recollecting the Buddha as a Buddhanusati is what you'd call a samatha practice, samatha meditation, to calm the mind, bring up a state of mindfulness, bring all the mental energy into one place so it gathers together, unifies. That's why we feel peaceful, happy as we do it. We're letting go of all the other distractions, negativity, sleepiness, worry, irritations, which we may be experiencing a lot of the time, and drains us. When you concentrate your mind on the Buddha as an object of meditation, then it's the opposite. Your mind's energy all gathers in one place. But this is what we call samatha meditation, learning to one point the mind, still the mind, quieten the mind, and energize the mind to overcome the 5 hindrances. And developing insight or wisdom, one turns to contemplate the impermanent nature of body and mind, and the stressful nature of that which is impermanent. It's stressful to experience a human body that's changing all the time. You can't absolutely rely on it because you never know what it's going to do next, and how it will feel, and what's going to happen to it. It's constantly changing, aging. With that, we get some pain and discomfort. And the mind also is stressful. We don't have one thought all the time. We have many thoughts. And that whole mental process of thoughts arising, passing away, feelings, sensations rising, passing away, they bring some stress because they agitate the mind. But observing that from a place of mindfulness, you practice samatha meditation to bring up the state of mindfulness, gather your mental energy together, experience a mind that is calm, still, tranquil, body and mind tranquil, so that you can then observe, investigate your experience more deeply and from a place of detachment. So observing the experience of body and mind in a detached way, you can't help but notice the stresses of this physical body and then the mental processes of the mind. They're impermanent, they're stressful. And ultimately, they're not a self that you can control or make do what you want, command. It'll be easy. Life would be a lot easier if we could just command our mind not to have any thoughts that we don't like, don't want, not to remember anything that brings us a feeling of pain or stress. If we could just command this mind just to do and be exactly the way we want, it'd be good. But we can't. The nature of it is it's not self. This is where the Buddha encouraged us to investigate, to develop understanding, investigate this body, this mind, to see the way it is. But we need the mindfulness to underlie that, to support that. So these two practices, samatha, vipassana, they work together. Ajahn used to say, it's like two ends of a plank of wood. You lift up a plank of wood and you've got samatha at one end, vipassana at the other end. But when you lift the plank of wood up, they both ends come up together. And they're really inseparable. And they're linked together and support each other, even though on paper we talk about them as different things. And sometimes when we're learning the Dhamma, it's helpful to put everything out in front of us, the theory, the words, the names, the relationships between different qualities, and the explanation how suffering arises, how we can let go of the causes of suffering, experience the cessation of suffering. We put it all out on paper, but in reality, this is all happening in this one human mind. And these different qualities support each other. And just as the negative qualities that cause us stress and suffering support each other, one thing leads to another. So the more you hold on to negative thoughts, such as rooted in greed, anger, worry, fear, the more deluded you become, the more that feeds back into the process of holding on and suffering. So the negative qualities of mind support each other, but in the same way, the positive, skillful qualities of mind also support each other. So as you practice meditation, you rely on effort and patient endurance, mindfulness, clear comprehension, insight, faith, and the qualities of kindness, compassion, and so on. All these positive, skillful qualities support each other. So it's a team effort. But it's all happening in the one mind. But it's not that you necessarily have to keep asking yourself, are the skillful qualities there or not? But from time to time, you reflect on what qualities you might need to develop. Just as when you reflect on the Buddha, you reflect on all the 10 paramis of the Buddha, and you see how all these 10 different paramis, different perfections work together to bring about a Buddha, or the mind of a Buddha. Well, our own mind is the same. We're developing different spiritual qualities. So sometimes we may focus on one in particular, but we're also looking at the relationships and how they support each other. And then the highest quality of wisdom that leads to detached understanding of the way things are, or true knowledge and vision of the way things are. It's also seeing that in the end, these qualities are just qualities of mind, mental states that are wholesome. There's not a self in them. They're not self. Because the habit of the deluded mind is always to create an identity around what we're doing. Even when we come to meditate or listen to Dhamma, sort of it's just this deeply ingrained habit always to say, this is me, this is who I am. Sometimes we like what we see when the good qualities are there. Sometimes we don't like what we see when the more negative qualities come up. And if we're not careful, we keep falling back into this sense of self, judging ourselves, criticizing ourselves, praising, and getting lost in, self-praise, conceit. Or we do the same with others as well. We create selves in other people all the time. And so much of the time, it's not even in line with reality. We just sort of put a label on other people as friend or foe, or good or bad, or somebody we agree with, somebody we disagree with, and so on. And this is the nature of the deluded mind, the unenlightened mind. We're constantly creating a self out of things. You see, we even do it with inanimate objects as well. So we like to create a self out of ornaments or furniture or a tree or a rock even. We give things names, give animals names, and so on. And this is the way of the deluded mind. Constantly creating a self-identity out of our experience. When you develop the samatha meditation, that helps you to stabilize the mind, steady the mind. So when you're putting attention just on the breath, you calm the mind down and you're more mindful of the breath. And of course, this sense of self disappears. So there's a very purifying effect on the mind, brings the mind to a place where it's aware and knows experience, but it's not creating anything out of experience. And that's very pleasant, very peaceful. Samatha meditation is peaceful because the sense of self takes a rest, takes a holiday. So you actually get a rest from the nagging mind, all the voices and the nagging, the praise and the blame that's going on internally. And you get a rest from external things as well, because when you're meditating, generally you're not talking to other people, or it's not a time when you're socializing or doing other things. So you actually get a good rest from the sense of self, just practicing samatha meditation. And often you see that in the sense of timelessness, when you're just focusing your awareness on the breath and keeping the mind with the breath successfully. It may take a lot of effort and practice, but when you're doing it, time passes quickly. You're not so worried about watching the clock. You're not worried when the bell is going to go. You're just following the breath. You're aware, you're awake, but the sense of self is not bothering you. You don't have to form an opinion about the breath. It's the best breath in the world or the worst breath in the world. It's beautiful breath, ugly breath, good breath, bad breath. It's just breath, and the mind absorbs into that more and more, the more mindful you are. That's your first taste of seeing impermanence, stressfulness, and then the selfless nature of phenomena, just absorbing into a meditation object. A lot of the things we normally identify with as self disappear. Feelings, thoughts, memories. And then if you actually train the mind to really look for these three characteristics, they're called the universal characteristics of impermanence, selflessness, stress, and selflessness. You start looking at them, you notice them in your experience. And once the mind is still and its energy is gathered together, you can notice thoughts arising and passing away. And when you cling on to them or identify with them as a self, you start to feel the stress of that again. Whereas if you're just noticing them arise and pass away, you're still thinking, but there's less clinging to them, less identification. You're just knowing and letting go. This is what we call vipassana, where you're knowing things but letting go at the same time. And you can train your mind to do that better. Sometimes we lead that investigation. You take a trip around your physical body, contemplating that. See the different elements of this body, the solid part, the liquid part, the air, the temperature. Seeing the selfless nature of these four elements. Sometimes we direct our attention to the mind, perceptions, sense consciousness. You see how the senses are constantly arising and passing away. One moment we're seeing, hearing, thinking, smelling, tasting, touching. As you direct your mindfulness to contemplate in that way, you see the arising and passing away all the time, but without getting caught up in it, just knowing arising and passing away. And this gives us great understanding and deeper understanding of experience. It's very liberating. Liberating from this sense of self, which deludes us so much. When there's a sense of self, there's a sense of continuity. That voice that says, me, I'm here, I know, I think, I'm right here. It's that sense of continuity that covers over the mind. It's like the story we tell ourselves. We've always got a story going on, who we are or who we think we are. And we embellish it and we add to it and take away from it and like bits of it and dislike other bits of it. And we have a lot of stress and suffering because of that. As your mind becomes more calm from the samatha meditation, then you can see through the story and see things more as they are, just the arising, passing away of experience. And it's very peaceful, the peace that comes from insight or understanding. So maybe I'll leave you with these reflections tonight, and we'll see if there's any time for question and answer.
Namayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Parang Tatamase Sadhu Sadhu Sadhu